Okay, so today we're going to talk about uh, how do we know if we're getting a good laptop computer when we go buy one. A lot of people anymore will go to a retail box store and just pick out a laptop based on how it looks or the numbers they have written on the spec sheet, but they don't really understand what any of that means. I mean, let's face it, when we walk into a store and we look at a computer, we have a lot of options. Some of them are $299. I've seen some that are several $1,000s. So, which one's good, and which one should we buy? Well, surprisingly, the answer depends. But there are some guidelines we can use that makes us smarter shoppers and puts us in the right spot to buy the right computer. Now, do we need to spend the least amount of money on the computer? No. Probably won't end up with a very good computer. What about if we spend this several $1,000s? You might be throwing your money away. So, how do we decide which one's the right one for us? Well, let's cover that right now. If you're not interested in explanation on why we choose a specific computer the way we do, go ahead and skip to the end of this video and I'll break down everything in a quick summary and you can go out and buy it. If you want to know the answer, then stick with me. I'll try to make this pretty quick. Okay, so here's the first thing you need to know, and this will shock you. A cheap computer, especially the laptop, is made cheap. I know, it's surprising. It amazes me. Um, but here's the truth. If you're going to build something and sell it, you need to make a profit off of it. So if you were starting your own business making cupcakes or tools or something, and you go out and you manufacture and it costs you $20 to make the item, you don't sell it for $25. You have to increase your money so that you make a profit. So if you're buying a $299 computer, or laptop in this case, you're getting a very cheaply made computer. They go out and buy the lowest spec systems they possibly can for the cheapest price, and they put it out there so they can turn a profit. Now the margin of profit is different. The high-end computers a lot of times will have a high-end margin of profit. They'll make more money off of them. The low end, it's tighter, but they still have to make money. And the only way to do that is to skimp out on you in the end. So when you go into a store and you're looking to buy a laptop, this is what I want you to do. I want you to ask questions. First, the first thing they should ask you always is, what are you looking to do with a laptop? Okay? That's important because what you're looking to do falls into a couple categories. I'm going to break it down into two. They can break it down into hundreds, but really there's two. The first is whether you're a professional. If you're doing professional photography, professional video editing, audio editing, any other kind of artwork, or you're doing very high-end gaming, you're a professional. Therefore, you need a higher-end computer to handle what you're going to do. If you're using the laptop for just routine schoolwork, or to browse the internet, or play solitaire, you're a lower-end user. Now, that doesn't mean you buy the cheapest computer, but it means that you probably don't need the most expensive computer out there. You don't need the highest end components to get a good computer that's going to last. Now, the second thing you should know is, what is your price range? You should know this going in, because if you don't know it, they could talk you into buying a computer you absolutely don't need, and you'll spend more money than what you really want to. Now, keep in mind, with laptops, you get what you pay for. So if you're going in with a price range of $299 to $399, then you're not going to get a real nice computer. That doesn't mean we can't make it better, but you get what you pay for. Okay? So now with those two things in mind, let's talk about the questions you should be asking. When they read off those numbers on the spec sheet and say it's a 1 terabyte hard drive, it's 4 gigs of RAM, it's this processor, that's great. But what does that mean? Okay, let's break it down, because I'm going to teach you some things that maybe even the salesperson doesn't know. The first element, and there's 4 that we're going to look at, the first one is the hard drive. The hard drive will usually be described to you in sizes, and it will come into 128 gigs, 250 gigs, 512 gigs, a terabyte. Okay, if you don't understand what a gig is and a terabyte, basically it's the amount of space you hold, the amount of items you can store on a document. So the difference between a gig and a terabyte is a terabyte is 1,000 gigs. Okay, so what's a gig? Let's say that you want to store a picture, and a picture is 5 megs. Okay, now the megs isn't really important. Let's say it's 5. Okay, let's keep the number 5 in mind. Now, a meg to a gig and a gig to a terabyte is 1,000. And to be real technical, it's actually 1,024, but there's a lot of confusion in that. So let's just say it's 1,000. Okay, so if we take 5 and divide it by 1,000, that gives us 200. So if we have a 5 meg image, and all of our images are 5 meg, and there's nothing else on the hard drive, we can store 200 photos on 1 gig. So what's a terabyte? Well, you multiply 200 times 1,000. Okay? So now that 5 meg image, we can now store on 1 terabyte. It would be around, if my math's right, was it 200,000? So from 1 gig to 1 terabyte, that's the difference. Okay? Now, let's explain hard drives, because this is stuff they won't tell you. This, my friends, is a hard drive. Okay? This is a hard drive. Now, a hard drive is used to store your information. And how this works is, if we take this top open, it's got a platter inside of here. And the platter spins around. Spin, spin, spin. And it's got a needle that comes over and reads the information that's on the hard drive. By the way, don't ever open your hard drive. This destroys it. Okay, this is a bad hard drive anyways, so I don't have to worry about destroying it because it's already dead. So, this platter spins, needle comes over, and it reads the information that's on this disk. And actually, you probably can't see it, but there's actually usually several platters, okay, that store your information. So what's the problem with this? Okay, here's the problem. If you remember a record player, or the first generation CDs, as this thing's spinning, and this needle, which is real flimsy, comes over and reads the information, if you move this device, for instance, you put your laptop on your lap and you're moving, then this head can actually hit the platter as it's spinning and cause damage. Think of it like when you used to scratch a record when you stomped through a room. Or if you remember the early CD players, you would move it while it was on it and it would start skipping. Well, it actually didn't really damage the CD, but the laser couldn't read the information. In this case, it actually damages this over time. So as this spins and this is being moved, your computer gets damaged. Now, a lot of people don't move their laptops, so it's not a big issue. And I'm not saying this will always fail, because they do last. But if you move your laptop a lot and you're using the traditional hard drive, which is this style, then it can be damaged. Well, why even put one of these in a laptop? That doesn't make any sense. Well, at the time, that was the best they had. That was the best they could do. So they put these in your computers. And typically, even today, if you see a computer that has 512, even 1 terabyte, 512 gigs, or a terabyte of storage, you're talking about one of these traditional hard drives. Now, there's another factor that influences these hard drives, and that's the rate or how fast these things can actually spin. Okay? Think of it like tires on a car. Okay? These things only spin so fast. Typically, they come in three speeds: 4,200 RPM, 5,400 RPM, and 7,200 RPM. That's revolutions per minute. Okay, so it spins 4,200 times in a minute, 5,400 times in a minute, or 7,200 times in a minute. Okay, here's the problem. Almost no one tells you how fast your hard drive is in your computer. So you should ask. You should say, what's the RPM on the hard drive? How fast does it spin? Typically, if you're buying one of those $299 computers, you're getting the 4,200 RPM. It's the slowest speed possible. If it's spinning slow, I can only read data slow. So my computer gets slow. If you get a medium range computer in the mid price range, above like 500, up to even thousands of dollars, a lot of times it's the 5,400 RPM. Now I know I said there was a 7,200 RPM. Here's the deal. Most people don't use it. It's out there, you can buy it, but most people don't use it. Well, this stores a lot of data. However, this is old technology. The new technology is this. It looks almost the same. Notice it's completely enclosed. This is called a solid state hard drive, or a SSD. Okay? If you have the option, you should go with SSD. This has no moving parts inside of it, which means if I jostle this around and I shake it while it's on, I'm not damaging anything, which means a laptop can actually be used as a mobile device, as it was intended to. Now, what's the downside? These are more expensive. The prices come in way down, but they're more expensive. So, if you can, buy a solid state hard drive. Okay, this will make your computer run faster, and it will make it run better. By the way, if you currently have a laptop that has a hard drive in it, a lot of times you can speed it up and make it perform better by using a solid state hard drive. Since there's no moving parts, I'm not limited by how fast this can spin. I'm limited by how fast the chip is on the board inside of here, and how fast the interface is that plugs into the back, the cable that runs into my computer. So, solid state hard drive, way to go. Also, make sure you ask if it is user replaceable. Can I replace this? If it's built onto the board, it's no good. And some of the new manufacturers are using different styles. And although they're user replaceable, they're harder to find and more expensive. So ask about the hard drive. How big is it? Is it solid state? If it's not, what speed is it spinning at? That's important to know. Okay, we'll come back to the hard drive at the very end. The next thing you need to know is RAM. RAM is a computer chip that's put inside your computer and used for short-term tasks. Okay, let's think of it like this. I just showed you the hard drive. Let's equate it to the human body. If I was to equate it to the human body, the hard drive is like my brain. My brain is capable of processing, or let's say my long-term memory part of my brain. My long-term memory part of my brain is capable of processing information that happened a long time ago. So I can tell you things I did when I was 5 years old, 8 years old, 10 years old. That information's in here. It's stored, it's locked in. A lot of times, it seems to me like it was almost yesterday I was doing some of these things. Well, that's what my hard drive does. It stores information for long periods of time. I can delete it and erase it if I don't want it, but it's designed to hold information. The RAM, on the other hand, is not designed to hold information. This is designed to only store it for a brief period of time and then forget it. So it's more like my short-term memory. So for example, if I said the numbers 7896431 and I said, remember that, you could probably remember it. If you played this video back enough and you listened to it, you could probably remember it for a while. 20 years from now, would you remember the numbers I just said? Or even 2 days? No, probably not. You would only remember it long enough to recite it back to me if I asked you. That's what this does. If I'm opening a lot of applications at once, it uses this and says, okay, I need to open this. I need to remember this, only for a little bit, and then I can forget it. Well, this is your RAM, okay? This usually comes in sets. It comes in sets of 2. You can buy them separate, but I don't recommend it. They actually do work best in sets. So, what should I know about RAM? Well, here's the simple trick. The larger the number, the better it is. They're going to come to you and say it's this many megahertz. Okay, it's 1,333 megahertz. It's 1,666 megahertz. The faster, the better. Okay, now there's some name brands and stuff, but don't worry about that. Worry about how fast is this. Is it 1666? That's pretty good. Okay, as I go lower, the quality's not as good. Now they're just going to worry about telling you it's 4 gigs or 8 gigs, and that's important to know too. But I want to know the speed. Okay, how fast is this RAM that I'm putting in my computer? Also, I want to know the amount. Right now, the recommended on most operating systems and most applications is around 2 gigs. I like to do at least 2 times the recommended amount. Okay, actually, I should say 3 times the recommended amount. So if I was buying a computer today, I would go with 6 or 8 gigs of RAM. Why? Because the next generation OSs and the next software that come out will probably require 4 gigs of RAM. It seems to step up in multiples of 2. So 2 gigs, 4 gigs, 8 gigs, 16 gigs, 32 gigs. Yes, the day's coming when 32 gigs is going to be normal. Years ago, we never thought 2 gigs was going to be normal, but guess what? It is. And it's actually very low now. So ask, when it comes to RAM, what's the speed and how much do I get? Okay, next, the processor. This is a processor. Okay, it's got some pins on it. Now, for those of you who know something about computers, you'll know this is a very old processor. They are much smaller than this now. And usually they're soldered to a board or connected in some other way. Okay? Now, this is the brain. We're not just talking about memory, the long term and the short term. This is the brain of the computer. It does all of the thinking. Okay? Now, when it comes to processors, there's 2 big name companies out there. The first one, AMD. The second one, Intel. If you see a laptop and it says it has an AMD processor, by default, assume it's a budget computer. It's a low-end computer. I'm not saying AMD is a bad processor. I've used them in a lot of machines, and you can buy high-end. But typically in a laptop, that means that it is a lower-end computer. They're buying for price. The other company, Intel, is actually a better brand to buy, but you need to know what processor you're getting. Okay, there are new processors out there, and they've been around for a while, and they've done them in generations. But here's your big 3 right now. It's an i3, like an I, but it's just a letter. i3, i5, and i7. Is it important to know? Not really. Just think the larger number, the better. Okay. 3 is your budget. 5 is your mid-grade. And 7 is your higher-end processor. Okay, so you need to know what processor you're buying. And you should go out and buy one that's an i3, i5, or i7, not AMD. And if you can afford to, stay away from the i3. Get an i5 or i7. Here's why. A processor in a laptop is not user replaceable. You need to ask whether your hard drive is, and you need to ask whether your RAM is, because that's going to change how we buy a computer, but the processor is not user replaceable. You cannot replace these. Even if you could, you would only get a minor improvement. So you need to buy the right speed right out of the gate. And here's what you're going to do. Focus on i5 or i7 and figure out, one, how fast is it? And that's going to come in gigahertz. So again, higher, better, but you have to have at least 0.2 difference or more to even notice the difference. So if it's like 2 gigahertz and one's 2.2, you're not going to notice the difference. If it's 2 gigahertz, 2.4, since it's bigger than the 0.2, you'll notice a little bit of a difference. Okay, so you need to know what processor, what speed, and how many cores. That's important. A core is like having multiple processors combined into one. So think of this like an egg carton with eggs. We put 6 eggs, 12 eggs, 18 eggs in a carton. Okay, that's our whole container. The individual eggs would be our cores. So in essence, if I have a 4-core processor, then I have 4 brains or 4 processors stacked into one chip, which means I can think more. Remember the old adage, 2 heads are better than 1? Well, in this case, 2 cores are better than 1. 4 cores are better than 2. 8 are even better than 4. If you see or you talk to them and they don't know the answer, walk away. Do your research, find out, and come back. Don't just buy it. And if they say it's a single core processor, like an Intel Celeron, walk away. You don't want it. We cannot upgrade it later, so leave it. Walk away. The last piece we need to talk about is the video card. Okay? Video card is where we get our video. So that will display our image on our laptop, or that will display an image from an external monitor in a laptop. Now this is a desktop video card. This is from a desktop computer. The laptop one is built onto the motherboard. Again, it is not upgradable in most cases. Almost all cases, actually. So you need to pick the right one that works for you the first time. So, how do we do that? We decide which category we are in. Remember I said there was a professional and there's a regular consumer category? Well, the professional end is going to be looking for a video card that has dedicated memory. What this dedicated memory means? It means I have this memory module, the RAM module we talked about earlier. I have this RAM module for my laptop, but I have these chips built onto the memory card, or sorry, the video card itself, so that it can think for itself. It doesn't need to use the system's RAM to rely on processing video. Okay. If it has a dedicated memory for the video card, and they must say dedicated, not shared, then you can feel pretty comfortable that your video card's going to hold up for the most part. You can do some research and find out the high end. If you're not a professional, you're not using this for high-end graphic software, video gaming, things like that. I'm talking about high-end video gaming, not Solitaire, not Minesweeper, not your average web games that kids would play. Talk about actual games that you download and install that are huge, like Black Ops, or I don't even know the big name computer games anymore, but the high-end graphic games, those you want dedicated. Otherwise, probably doesn't matter that much. So, as I said, I'll break this down for you simple. What do I look for when I'm looking for a new computer? Most importantly, you need to have a goal in mind of how much money you want to spend. First and foremost, you need to identify yourself. Are you a professional? Are you using high-end graphic software, video software, audio software, or doing high-end gaming? Or are you a regular consumer? Okay, because that determines what video card you're really going to need. You need to know what processor you're getting. And my recommendations are an i5 or i7 currently. And the more cores are better. You need to ask how many it has. Because those items, the video card and the processor, we can't replace. So we're stuck. Once we buy it, you're stuck. There's nothing you can do. And lastly, we need to ask, what's our RAM? How much do we get? We'll go on for 6 or 8 or more. 6 gigs, 8 gigs or more. What hard drive do we have in there? How big is it? And is it solid state traditional? How fast does it spin if it's traditional? Now, if you want to cut costs, the RAM and the hard drive can be replaced later. So if I get a good processor and a video card I want, I can always put a solid state in later, and sometimes it's cheaper. And I can always add more RAM later. So maybe I go with 4 gigs now, or 6 gigs now, and I know that I can buy it later. As the price comes down even more, it's cheaper, I can keep my laptop running. But the trick is they both have to be user replaceable. Some companies are now doing the RAM, the memory sticks, soldered to the motherboard, which means you can never upgrade it, which means you're stuck, which means you're going to throw away this computer as it starts to slow down. Okay? So keep those elements in mind. What type of hard drive, how big, what RAM, what speed, how much, what processor, i5, i7, how many cores, what video card, does it have dedicated memory. Keep those in mind. It'll help you pick out a good computer. Okay? Last couple points. Computers and laptops especially are sold in 3 stages. Consumer, which is your lower grade. Business, which is a step above. They're built a little bit better, built to last a little longer. And then professional grade, and I throw gaming in with professional grade. Okay? If you go to most big box retailers, just understand you're down here. You're in the consumer grade. You're usually not touching the business grade. You're going to actually have to go to the websites to find those laptops. Okay? And you can look them up on their websites, HP, Dell. The only company that really doesn't separate it like that is Apple for the most part. And that'll lead me into my final point. Should I buy an Apple computer or a Windows computer? Well, the preference is yours. I hate Windows 8.1, but Windows 10 is coming. So if you buy a new computer and it has Windows 8.1 on it, just understand that there is a ray of sunshine coming later when 10 comes. Okay? A Mac, I'm a big Mac fan. I like them. I can do anything you can do on a Windows machine on a Mac. I have fewer issues with them. They run longer. Apple gives away their upgrades for free. And they just work with most devices. I can even run full Windows on my Mac if I want. Okay? So, which one should you go with? It's your choice. Either way, you'll be fine. But just make sure you look at those other elements pretty thorough. Okay, that wraps it up for today. Later on in a future video, we'll talk about securing our internet web browser and how to secure our computers, regardless of whether you decide to buy a Mac or a Windows machine or whether you have one of the two. You're not safe on the internet. So, how do we secure our computers? How do we keep ourselves safe from getting viruses, spyware, and malware? Well, stay tuned. We'll talk about it.